So my name is Deirdre Fitzpatrick. I'm the morning anchor at KCRA TV, NBC. So it's channel 3 to get up early, you know, back when we used to have to get up early for school. And I have been the morning anchor there for more than 20 years. So I've been there for a really long time. And I have done a lot of things in my career. I've anchored the morning news. I've traveled all over the world to go to 10 Olympics. I've covered breaking news all over the place. But the one thing I had never done until March is work in my house, because I didn't have what was perceived as a super flexible job. So we never, ever, ever would have worked from home. We always worked in a studio. We worked in the field. We worked with live trucks. We would work at the scene of where a story was, because obviously you had to go somewhere to put together a story. But the idea of working out of your house had never even occurred to me. So go back to March when we all got sent home on that Friday, and Sunday afternoon, I got a call from my boss and he said, well, we have a plan. And so I figured the plan was I come in earlier, because that's usually how it works in my field. And instead he said, we're gonna have you work from home this week. I was like, huh, how's that gonna work? So I had a few hours to figure it out. And so I had to look and see, what kind of gear did I already have? How could I get myself on TV? Because at that point, my bosses were putting out a lot of fires, just like your teachers and administrators were. And so I had to figure out, what could I do to get on TV? And because I flat out asked my boss, I said, what's your plan? I don't have one. Okay, I guess I'll come up with my own plan, self-preservation. So I started like looking around and trying to figure out, like, what do I have that I could get on TV with? Skype. Back then, nobody was talking about Zoom. Skype, I knew. Skype I had used for years, off and on, but not really recently. So I had to dig up my Skype account, figure out how I could do that. Okay, then I had to think, how am I going to light myself? Well, I've shot Facebook Live videos and I have a little light. I'll use one of those. Okay, great. How am I going to, what am I going to use for a camera? And the phone is an obvious one that you would use, except that I needed the phone to be able to dial into what we call an IFB, which is the earpiece, how we listen to the producers. So I figured it would be better to have a computer. So I decided to use my personal computer to be able to do that. And so I cobbled together what I thought would get me onto TV. I emailed my plan to my crew back at the station. I said, here's my plan. I don't know if it'll work or not, but let's give it a try. And within a couple of hours, I was standing in my kitchen on TV, wearing my slippers, working from home for the first time in my entire career. So what I discovered, what you guys have all discovered very quickly, is that there is always a way to do things. You just sometimes have to like step back and figure out, like, well, what do I have? In the last session, you saw a lot of really awesome gear, most of which, by the way, has only come into existence in the last 5 to 10 years, which is kind of mind blowing when you think about it. But sometimes, like, even if you have really expensive gear and you have all the time in the world and you have the perfect situation, stuff happens. Something crazy can happen, and you got to sit back and you got to figure out, how can I problem solve this to make it work? So I'm going to show you what I've been doing for the last 6 months, because I spent about half the week now working from home, helping write stories for our morning news, and then also anchoring from home as well. And I have turned tons of stories from home, shooting them through Zoom, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. And then I've also put together a weekly podcast from my house as well. And most of this is being done with gear I already owned. Most of it was personal gear. Most of the things I'm going to show you I own and I had bought over the years. And then a lot of it is just using stuff around my house, getting creative, like going back to the basics of just good storytelling. So in the last session, you heard about the rule of thirds and using a tripod and using whatever light is available to you and figuring out those things. And a lot of it is going back to those basics. And I know you've been learning in school. So let me go ahead and give you, I'm going to just stand up here, move a few things around, and I'll give you an idea of what I've been doing. So I'm going to take this off the tripod after telling you guys to use a tripod, but that's all right. Okay. So here is what I see. This has been my setup for the last 6 months. So this is in my living room and into my kitchen. I have 2 lights. I'll come around this way to show you. I use 2 lights. So one of them is a ring light, like the one you saw in the last session. This is just something off of Amazon. I think it was about $25, and it's a USB. So that USB plugs into one of my laptops here. Easy peasy. It's also got a little phone tripod there to stand, which is great. The second light I'm using is a Dracast. It's called a soft yoga light. And I have it on just a pretty inexpensive $20 stand. The light itself is a little bit pricier, but has turned out to be a really good investment for me. And it's very easy. So it's simple, turn on and off. I can turn it up if I need to. I've discovered this is about the right setting for me. And what I really like about it, for me, is that I leave it set up and I leave it in the garage. But what's really great, because I have kids and dogs, is I can touch it. So it's cool to the touch. So for me, knowing I was going to be here for a while doing this, safety kind of became a big deal. Now, if I take you around to this angle where I sit, I am using my personal laptop and Skype to be able to dial into the station. So the producers will reach me that way. And then over on this side is, hang on one second. Sorry, I got logged out. Is a program called ENPS. And ENPS is a news program where we can access wire copy. We can talk to each other no matter where we are. And this is how I'm writing scripts from home. So this is a news rundown right here. This is the noon news, which I actually anchored in the station today. And when I'm sitting here, I'm following along and I'm looking at all these different stories. So if, say, the producers call me and they say, we're going to have you anchor the A block of the news, I would pull up all of these scripts here. And usually just to make them easier to see, I might choose to enlarge them. And as I'm reading, I can flip between all these scripts. And this is also how I'm editing scripts as well. I write a lot of scripts when I'm working from home. So those are the two components there. So then you get to the next element, which is good sound. Now, right now, I'm just going off of my phone audio because it's quiet and this is casual. But that is not great for going on television because your goal is you're looking for really good sound. So I took my podcast microphone, which is a Blue Yeti mic, which is kind of like the standard entry level for a lot of podcasts. You can get these on Amazon, Best Buy, I mean, really almost anywhere. And they are a USB mic. And so I have that just plugged into the computer there. And so off of Skype, I'll select that as my audio source, right? But, and I noticed that somebody just commented on this, I have this. So that is called a pop filter. And the pop filter is one of my favorite things because the pop filter just smooths the sound out, right? Pop filter is a very inexpensive thing too, because there's really nothing to it, right? It's just a little bit of soft material there. And actually, back in the day, true story, flip this around. Back in the day, and that day was a long time ago, I used to work with a photographer in Des Moines, Iowa, and he had, because he didn't want to purchase one of these, because this is before Amazon, he would take a pair of like women's pantyhose and he would put it over the microphone to use as a pop filter. It worked, but I'm not going to lie, it was really weird. Okay, so we'll come back here. So I use the pop filter because it just softens your sound. And there are a couple letters when you are recording your stories that will have a tendency to pop, pop, pop. The letter P is a really obvious one, right? So when you use a pop filter and you back off of it a little bit, the nice thing is it kind of softens out that sound. And if you're new to voicing a story or learning how to use your voice, those letters, T's, P's, they have a real hard edge to them and they can make it just feel kind of harsh sounding, right? So this is where I've been sitting. One thing that's kind of interesting to know, I'm sorry, hang on one sec, guys. Can you hold the dog back for me? Actually, you know what? I'm going to take a little detour here and I'm going to tell you this part of it. The dog stuff has been one of the weirdest things for those of us on TV because we've got lots of distractions behind us. Sometimes we have really serious news. So most of the morning when I'm sitting here, I have this young dog who's there. She's only one. She has tons of energy. She's very fun. But then we also have this one who is super old and cranky and kind of the man of the house. So, and there you go. That kind of stuff happens all the time. So to take care of that, I keep right next to me dog treats. I am not kidding you. There have been times I have been reading the news all morning long and I am literally throwing dog treats and nobody's watching me do it. So just kind of a weird thing, but it seems to be working. And I know a lot of people have had to do that with kids as well. Okay. So one thing I'll tell you, when you are shooting your interviews or if you're shooting yourself, the positioning, the head positioning of where you're sitting is super, super important. So you heard in the last session, they were talking about framing with your subjects, with you. I always sit back a little bit because you can always edit if you need to in the, in editing, you know, if you need to do something, you can always do that, but it's just good to kind of sit back a little bit and give yourself some nice headroom. It's typically a much more flattering thing. And you'll find that the people that you're interviewing will probably like it better as well. I'm going to throw this back onto stand. Now, one of the weird things about us working from home is that we're home, right? So you have all the people who are around you, but you're also, if you do what I do, people are used to seeing me in a studio or they're used to seeing me out by a live truck or at a live scene, but they're not used to seeing like the chaos of my home and all this stuff. So there was a level of adjustment, not only for me to have people I don't know in my house, and that is kind of how it feels, but also for my family as well. And this is important for you guys. When you choose that quiet space, like I talked about in the last session, choose a space that you can control. So when I started doing this, I used the kitchen background over like 3 feet that way. But what I realized was I live in a house full of boys. And when boys get up in the morning, you never know who's going to be running around in like boxer shorts or doing crazy things. And I needed to have an area behind me that I could control. And this area back here, I might have a dog running behind me, but I didn't have to worry about somebody in my house running behind me. So it helped me control the area, which also helps you control everything behind you, because when you are doing your Zooms or you're doing your live reports, people are always looking behind you. I do it myself. When I see people being interviewed on the evening news and they have a bookcase, I am totally trying to figure out, what are they reading? What's on that bookshelf? What award is that they've got on the shelf? It's like totally natural. So every morning when I start all of this, I have to actually clean up the living room and make sure that there's nothing weird behind me. So for example, let's look behind me here. I'll show you. Here's one of the things that's here today. I got toys. So this was behind me. This would be one of the things that probably at 3 in the morning I'd be, what is this called again? What? This.
It's a TIE fighter.
I know, I'm just kidding. I just wanted to see if he was paying attention. Yeah, it's usually like all kinds of, you know, Star Wars stuff that's all over the place. So control your background. And then control a space where you don't have to worry about people behind you. One other thing is, I know a lot of you guys, anybody who's in school, your sanctuary is probably your bedroom, right? Because it's a place you can go to where hopefully people are going to leave you alone and let you have a little privacy. One thing I'll tell you is try to look for a corner in your room that you can keep as like a real neutral background. We had somebody on representing a big company the other day who was on our news to talk about super serious things. It had to do with fires and turning power off. And this person was recording a Zoom in her bedroom. And the only thing people at our station were commenting on was the fact that her bed wasn't made. It was all messy behind her. So if you have important things to talk about, you're looking to keep the background neutral, to keep it so that it's not distracting. Because if somebody is looking behind to see, is that a TIE fighter? Is that a submarine? Why does she have a submarine behind her? They're not really listening to what you say. So a really nice, clean, neutral background is really important. And all the basics are important. So having like good headroom. So right now I might tilt that down just a little bit more. And probably I'd move over so that I don't have the horns of that thing coming out of my own head, because that would be kind of weird. So take a second before you start recording things. Take a second to look and see, is there anything in the way this is set up that takes away from my message, takes away from my storytelling? And if you're interviewing somebody on Zoom, you have to help them look good, because your job is to make people look good. I always tell people that when I interview them. And because they usually feel uncomfortable, because why wouldn't you? It's a very vulnerable thing to do. But I always tell them, my job is to make you look good. My job is for you to not even think about any of this stuff so that you can get your message across, and we can tell this story, and you don't have to feel uncomfortable like you don't look very nice or that you aren't going to sound very good. So my job is to make it really good. So let me give you kind of my best practices, and then I'll take you on a funny tour and show you where I've been doing the podcast. And then if you guys have questions, I'm open to anything you want. So best practices as you are doing newscasts for school, or you're doing interviews, or you're just doing regular Zooms. I would make a checklist, because the more you have going, the more likely you are that you are going to forget things. So when I get the laptop fired up to get ready for my day of doing my anchoring from home, first thing I do is I go into my notifications and I select do not disturb, so that when I'm on live, you're not going to be hearing email alerts or text messages, that kind of thing coming in. That is at the top of my list. I would make a list of whatever equipment that you know you need. So for me, I know that I need my laptop, my audio, I need my light, I need cookbooks. All these laptops are set up on cookbooks. They're set up on stuff. I'll take it off the tripod one more time. My setup here, I have a fancy light and I have a nice microphone, but I also have a whole stack of cookbooks. And I know exactly how many cookbooks it takes to put that laptop up so that I'm set up. And I know that this box is usually good enough for that one to prop it up and get it just right. And I know that if I leave this on the counter, that you will typically not be able to see it in the frame of my shot that's going out on KCRA 3. So have a list of the equipment that you need, especially until it becomes just like second nature, and you can do it in your sleep and you don't have to think about it. I mean, I can get all this stuff set up now in probably, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. If faster if I needed to, but it usually takes me about that much time. Next thing is to set it up and test it out. So get your gear all set up, test it, make sure everything is good. If you initiate a Zoom or a Skype and you hear a little echo or you hear a funny sound, it will be on the recording. Hands down, it will. Redial. There is nothing easier than redialing. And again, your job is to make that person look good. They're not going to care if you take a few minutes to do that. Look at your background, whether that is a virtual background or a real background. Just make sure that you've looked at your background, looked at your lighting, and that everything's the way you think it should be. Be on time for those appointments. And being on time, and I tell my boys this all the time, being on time means being early. I'm getting eye rolls, but it does. Because you don't want somebody showing up to the Zoom room and you're not even there yet. So make sure you are there. Be sensitive to the people in your house who don't want to be on the TV. That's why I'm here, so that I don't have to worry about somebody doing something behind me. But that also means, being sensitive to the people in your house, like maybe letting them know, hey, I'm going to be on in about 10 minutes. Could you keep it down? Or could you take care of the dog or whatever? So be sensitive to the people who are around you. Because they're not necessarily choosing, in my case, to live in a TV studio, although that's kind of what they're doing these days. Have a plan B. This is the most important thing in journalism. Things are going to go wrong. So you have always got to have a plan B. So if my light goes out, then what? Maybe I move closer to the window. Maybe I know that I can move to another room where natural light might work better. Maybe I'm moving outside. Always have kind of a plan B of how you're going to get around things. And then the last thing I will tell you is accept the fact that there are some days where it just isn't working. You're going to have some days where it just doesn't work. Something's not great. Something goes wrong. You mess up. You're just not into it. Sometimes days are just like that. So just resolve to troubleshoot with what you could have done better and then try to do better the next time. But every day is a real learning experiment these days. And in my industry and what you guys are learning now, I have learned more in 6 months than I think I had learned in 10 years before that. We have had to be incredibly resilient and problem solving and innovative. And that's really kind of exciting because I've seen some people in my industry who have kind of embraced it and said, look, this is it. This is where we're going to be. Let's figure out a way to do the best job we can. And then there are some who, sorry, can you take her out?
I'm still trying.
Okay, why don't you hear? Sorry. Here's some of these.
Deidre, can
Plan B, right there, right?
you share that story you and I were talking about earlier today about how you cranked out the story about the ash there at the house?
Yeah.
You turned it and got it on air. Can you just kind of relay that to everyone?
Absolutely. So, some of being resilient and some of problem solving is figuring out like, we had this plan this morning, but this might make more sense. So for example, yesterday, there was ash falling all over the Sacramento area, and I was fronting a story about, I don't even remember what it was about. It was not a super exciting story, but I called my producer. I said, there's ash all over the place. The sun just came up. I just went outside. How about I pivot? And how about I go shoot a story real quickly on that? So I took my ring light that I showed you earlier that has the tripod stand on it, and I went to 3 locations around my house, and I shot the first part with me talking about the air behind me and how orange that sky was. And then I shot a second part where I just went down on all the ash that was all over some cushions outside. And it was just me talking over it. And I like moved my hand along the cushion and I hit the cushion and you watch the ash all fly up. And then I shot a third one where I was holding up a dirty cushion in front of the camera. And this is all off of my iPhone that I'm using right now. And I kind of wrapped the story up. And I used that, it was a white cushion that was covered in ash, and I shook it and you just watched the ash go down. It was 3 different cuts, right? So 3 pieces. It edited with 3 simple edits off of iMovie. And then I uploaded it from my phone directly into our system at KCRA3. So we have kind of like a Dropbox, but it's called Oasis. And I sent it right in. It ran 49 or 50 seconds, and it was on TV within 10 minutes. It took me 7 minutes to think of it, execute it, edit it, and upload it. Now I've been doing this, it's the dawn of time, so I can produce in my head pretty quickly. But there are so many easy ways that you can do this. And speed over perfection is very important in news. We all love the idea of working on something forever, but sometimes you get 7 minutes. And sometimes that's the thing that actually is the more valuable. And if you're telling breaking news stories or something that's really important to students in school, or it's important to your colleagues at work, do it fast, do it clean, use your basics that we were talking about a little while ago, but just get it done. And sometimes that's better than something that you might have spent 3 weeks trying to come up with and execute.
Great, thank you. All right, you're gonna take us on a quick tour, is that right?
Yeah, okay, so let me show you, so the podcast. We have a room at the station that we had been using for the podcast. But when all this broke, it was kind of pointless because we weren't, obviously going to be able to use that anymore. So this is one of my podcast mics. I have 2 podcast mics. These, like I told you, are Blue Yeti mics, very easy to get and very easy to use. I use my personal laptop to record the podcast, and I use a program called Audio Hijack. And I love it because it's super easy and it's drag and drop. And this is what I've been recording the podcast on for like the last 2 years. And I had been having to do this, primarily alone. So when I was home, all of a sudden, I'm like, well, how am I going to be able to do this from here on out? And I realized the best place you can go to record audio is you need something to shroud the sound. So I came into my closet, and I've been using this little like serving tray. And there's my other mic. And this is where I've been recording the podcast for the last 6 months. And the audio, I will tell you, and this is insane, the audio has never been better. And that's one of the things that we've definitely learned in the pandemic, is that you have to get really creative sometimes, because you're not going to have the ease of walking into a studio or ease of walking into having lots of people to work with or a partner. I mean, one of my favorite things of working at Channel 3 is the people I get to work with. I work with amazing photographers who are incredibly collaborative, and I love that process of working together, but I don't have the luxury of it right now. So I have leaned in to leaning out, meaning I will text or call people who I know are really good at things. When I didn't think the lighting was really right, I was texting photographers. How do I do this? Here's what I have. How can I do this better? And sometimes they would send me a note back and say, move that like 2 feet over, and then let's try doing it this, raise it. They would give me some things to try. So never hesitate to reach out to people who you think are doing a better job or who you think have their act together. You'll be surprised at the information that they will share. And especially podcasting is especially like that. I have DM'd so many people who I listen to on podcasts, like people who have really, really successful shows. They almost always write back. Almost always. People who have like top 20 shows on Apple iTunes and who are making a lot of money doing it. I mean, this is kind of a passion project for me at work. I have gotten such great information from them. And in return, you pass it on. So when somebody asks you something or asks for some help, always share that information. You know, like good information and doing good work should never be a secret. Never, right? So don't hesitate to reach out to people and ask them how they do things.
Do you have any other words of wisdom for all of our students? Words of encouragement?
Well, I think you guys are in a really interesting time right now because you are all, and we are all kind of guinea pigs to figure out how to make do during a really crazy, uncertain time. So I would challenge you to develop some good, resilient skills out of this. Hopefully you'll never have to work or go to school and anything like this ever again. But every day we have an opportunity to learn how to do something better. When this started for me, I could have chosen to complain and to refuse to work like this or something like that, but that's not really my nature. So I chose to figure out a way to do it, but also to do it well, because I wasn't okay with the audio not being good. I wasn't okay with it not looking good. I wasn't okay with it being distracting. So my job was to be able to do, or my goal was to be able to do my job to the best of my ability every single day using what I have. Is it perfect? No, absolutely not. Is it enough? Yeah, I think it probably is. Could it be better? Sure. Is it going to get better today? Probably not. So I try to do the best job that I can. And there have been some good things that have come out of it. I produced 40 podcast episodes from my closet. That's ridiculous. I have been able to interview people all over the country because I now have the ability to interview them through Zoom. I have seen people who went viral on Facebook and thought that'd be a great story. For example, the woman who really made those chalk fitness things that everybody was doing a couple months ago. Do you remember when everybody started doing those like chalk fitness, like hopscotch things outside? That all came because of this woman, Jody Baptiste, who is a teacher. She teaches special needs kids in Phoenix. She drew this sensory chalk walk and it went viral, had 1 million views in like 24 hours. And she was just a teacher who had thought to share this YouTube video, and then people started sharing it because they needed it. And I sent her a message on Facebook thinking there's no way she's going to see this, and I'm sure everybody's trying to talk to her. Well, within 2 hours on a Monday when I sent that message, not only had she messaged me back, within 3 hours, I had done a Skype interview with her. I went out with some chalk, I drew chalk stuff on my on the driveway. I knew some neighborhood kids would go through it. I went and shot a whole bunch of stuff on my own. And I had a story within a couple of hours featuring a woman who had just gone viral because I sent a note and I asked. So people, you have this incredible ability to reach out to almost anyone you want to talk to right now. And chances are they'll say yes. And chances are they know how to do it because everybody knows how to Zoom and Skype now. If they didn't know in March, they all know now. And trust me, they didn't know in March because when I would ask them to do interviews and I said, what's your Skype name? 8 people out of 10 couldn't figure out how to do Skype. They couldn't remember how to do it. Now everybody can, and everybody can Zoom. And you guys are doing so much on Zoom. So be an innovator right now. There's no wrong. This is like a wild west of exploration and innovation and creativity. And there is no wrong right now. There really isn't. So go have some fun and learn how to be the next generation of storytellers. And I can't wait to see what you guys come up with.
Great. In the bio, there was a question from Jerry Bandy there. Could you read that off for us real quick?
I got 2 questions here. I think the one you're referring to is what kind of stories would you recommend for students to develop while at home? Is that the one?
Okay, so here's the secret. Almost all the stories I've done in the last 6 months are answering questions that I had of my own. Because I figure if I'm a middle-aged mom and I don't know how to do something, chances are there are a few others who also need to know that too. So for example, the chalk walk. I need to get my kids out of this house. I need to get them moving. I need to build some community outside. That resonated with me. So ask yourself, what do you need to know? You're a couple of weeks into distance learning. What are the issues you have? In my house, my kids, I have a 9th grader and I have a 6th grader. I've noticed that by about 11:45, after a couple hours of Zooming, they both complain of getting headaches every day. They both are saying, oh, I'm getting a headache. Well, that's interesting. Why are they both complaining in different parts of the house of the same issue? So yesterday I asked the pediatrician, I said, why are my kids complaining about this? He said, all kids are. So do a story about that. Find a doctor and say, is this a common thing? What can we do? And there were some simple answers that my pediatrician had of like 3 things you could do to make it easier. People love it. People will always love your stories if you can teach them how to do something. You can make them smarter. You can entertain them, or you can fill a void that they didn't know that they had. So if you can teach somebody how to improve themselves right now, feel better about themselves, or fix a problem that they have in a relatively simple way, that's a great story. So look at yourself and ask yourself, what is it that I need to know right now? Or what are my friends talking about that they want to know how to do? And that's an easy way to give yourself a story assignment.
Great. And about you had one more that Julio had sent over to you?
Yes. Well, there's a lot. Do you have any tips for interacting on Zoom interviews?
Yes. Okay. So one tip for Zoom is make sure you know where the camera is on your phone. And also don't be afraid to tell the person that you're interviewing to remind them where to look as well. Because we typically, and I'll just look, I want to look over here, right? Because that's where I'm seeing the image, but the camera is actually right here. So remembering that is one thing. The other thing is most of your great stuff with an interview comes during the casual time. So saying something like, we're recording now, or we're starting the interview now, is like the surest way to make people super uncomfortable. It's pretty obvious when you're recording a story that you're recording. So chat, have it casual, ask people casual questions about, and then kind of lean in. So that's one thing that I would say is good for helping people do that. Don't underestimate the value of small talk about meaningful things. What's the hardest thing for you during all this time? Or have you learned any interesting tips? Like have some conversation first, because it kind of loosens both of you up, and then get into the interview. But I think it's important to be prepared, but also be casual and make people feel comfortable.
Okay, we got one more question coming.
Wait, one more. Don't ask people questions don't ask them obvious questions that you either could get the answer to somewhere else, like real factual things. Like you should know the basic things going into it. So ask them things that are meaningful and be very cognizant of people's time. That's another thing if you say, hey, may I please talk to you for 15 minutes, get out of it in 13 minutes. So always leave a little time under, rather than going over on people's time. That makes an impression. And if you call them for something else, that's also a good indication that they'll say yes the next time.
All right, about you have one more? We'll hop out.
Yeah. This question is, when do you think you'll go back to the studio?
So I have been splitting my time. And I have been doing a couple days at home and then a couple days in the studio. And the way our station, actually our company did it is we have, for example, in the mornings, we have 2 morning anchor teams. So we have anchor team A and we have anchor team B. And so what our company did is they took an A and a B and repaired them up to be a team, and an A and a B and repaired them to be a team. And the rationale behind that was the A team were the more experienced people. So you wanted to keep a more experienced person with maybe a lesser experienced person so that you kept a little bit more continuity on the shifts, because the bet when this all started was that eventually you'd probably have some people who tested positive for COVID. And if they did, you were probably going to lose an entire shift's worth of people. So the idea was that if we kept one team at home, working from home, if that other team had somebody test positive, you could just swap people in. 6 months, we have not, knock on wood, had anybody test positive, which has been great. Our staff has been super healthy. So starting next week on Monday, our original teams, the 2As and the 2Bs, are going to be repaired together, which is really great because our partnerships with anchor teams are super important. And so we're all really looking forward to kind of getting a little bit of normalcy back in this very abnormal time. So we'll be back in, but we are still not going to all be in. We are working a very skeleton staff at the station still. So we have very strict rules when we're in the station. We have some people who are only allowed to be in certain areas, other people are only allowed to be in other areas. And we have a lot of people who are working from home or who were just having to stay home for a while. So I do miss the normalcy, which I think we all do.
Okay, thank you so much for spending so much time with us. We really appreciate it.
No problem. And if you guys have questions, if you go to KCRA.com, just look up my bio, and that's like a test. Because I gotta see if you can spell my first name because it's weird. But there's an email link, and you are welcome to reach out, email me, and then just make sure you put something in the subject line that we did this, so I'll see it because we get a lot of emails these days. But if you think of more questions, I think I saw a couple coming through. People were asking about gear and what different things cost, and I'm happy to share that with you guys. No problem. But I will just tell you one last thing. You don't have to spend a lot of money to look good, sound good, and to do good work. So remember, you have an iPhone, which is the most valuable camera on the planet right now, or whatever smartphone you're using. It is as good, if not better, than a lot of the really expensive stuff that we use professionally in television.